Welcome everyone to the East Lyme Board of Finance, our regular meeting. Today is Wednesday, September 10th. The time is 5:30. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd also just like to take a point of privilege and have a moment of silence. We have just learned that Charlie Kirk, who was very involved, founder of TPUSA, which was a conservative organization, but he talked about family, he talked about religion, and he talked about community involvement, and we need to stop all this political violence. And given that we're all part of the political community right here, I think that it was appropriate to take that moment of silence for him. Thank you.
Of course.
Next on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Do I have a
I
motion?
can make a motion to approve the minutes of the August 13th, 2025 regular meeting.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any corrections or discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes of August 13th signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries 6-0. Next is delegations, where members of the public could address anything that's on the agenda. Seeing no members of the public in the building, is there anybody on the Zoom or anything? Nope. So we'll go on to reports first from our first selectman.
Yeah, thank you. So, a few things to report tonight. We've had a good week in the area of public safety. As everyone knows, of course, our new police chief has been sworn in. I had a meeting with him today to begin to discuss some preliminary issues. One of the things I mentioned before in one of our previous meetings was the situation with our communications system, and how at some point we would probably be looking for money to solve that problem. The communications with the radio system, with the police, the fire, and the other entities that have to be able to communicate. As it turns out, our chief is somewhat of an expert in that area. A prior job that he had in the prior where he was police chief, they had similar issues with an inadequate and a communication system that and it had to be revamped. He was instrumental in that endeavor. He has made certain suggestions. He considers this his number one priority right now, one of his top priorities, because he's very concerned about the safety of our officers. There are situations where police officers cannot communicate with dispatch and one another. So he wants to see that that gets resolved. His suggestion to me was that we have a group now that we've formed, a committee for the radio system. He wants to work with that committee. He already met with them even before he was sworn in, so he could sort of get ahead of it. And he has a suggestion for a consultant that was very helpful in his former town to achieve success in bringing the whole radio system together. So you'll be hearing more about that as he identifies who that is, and we'll probably be requesting money to hire that consultant to work with our radio committee. He has other suggestions too, but I don't want to go over everything that we talked about today. But I think he will, that expertise is going to be very helpful getting us where we need to go. Also, on Monday, we have appointed 3 fire captains, and 1 on each shift, and they all started on Monday. So now we have fire captain coverage on each shift. And also, we appointed a new fire inspector, and she started Monday. So we've made good progress in public safety in East Lyme. Also, this week, the fire boat Boston Whaler, that was re-engined, that has a new engine on it. I don't know if it's in service yet today, but it's almost ready to go. So I was inspecting it yesterday, and my goal was to make sure that was functional before the people that own boats that could rescue somebody if we weren't able to before those boats come out of the water. So I think in the next week that'll be operational. That's my report. Any questions?
Question, please. I recall, maybe this is probably for Kevin too, some months ago when we were talking about like the radios that
Yes.
were previously purchased but weren't able to, I think, interact
Yes.
with the other radios of other
Right.
safety systems. Is there any possibility of a buyback or anything that we can get from those under-functioning radios?
Well, I'll be glad to address that.
Thanks.
So it was approximately $430,000 with those radios. And what we had been told, and what we had been led to believe in the past, was that they couldn't be used because of a software copyright infringement problem with the use of the radios. We had the hardware, but we didn't have the software. Well, apparently that isn't the case. He's familiar with those radios. He immediately, yesterday, our new chief, looked into where they are. They're in a warehouse, and he ordered that they be shipped to East Lyme, so we'll have them. If we don't have them today, we'll have them in a few days, all of the radios. Those radios they're 5 years old now, but they're still good technology. They're still, respected radios. They're workable, and he says it is possible to make them work with our system, at least temporarily, and he's going to look into resolving that issue if he can, and if not, he believes that there would be a trade-in or a buyback value, not $400,000, but at least something to recoup some of our expenses. So already he's jumped in on that, and so that's the answer on that. So it may be better news than we could have hoped for.
Yeah, thank you. Good.
Yeah. Anything else?
No,
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next on the agenda is the Board of Education budget versus actual report. As you recall, part of the state regulations require that the Board of Ed provide quarterly reports to the Board of Selectmen and heads on to us. So that is provided here. And they are ending the year with a budget surplus of $233,353.69. We'll have more to discuss under new business in regard to where that $233,000 goes. Other remarks on that? No? Then we can move on to Mr. Gervais and the finance reports.
All right, my computer is crashing out on me right now. So I do not have, I just have the couple title slides up there tonight for our PowerPoint. Hold on here. We're just going to have to do pen and paper because it's not working. All right, 25 budget versus actuals. Last month I provided the revenues. This month I have the expenditures here. There's a few things I need to fix and reconcile with the Board of Ed and some debt service payments that were booked to wrong accounts. But I will email this over to everybody. We are a couple $100,000 in the right direction. on the expenditure side. Police returned $150,000 approximately. That was due to some staffing issues they had closer to the end of the year. Dispatch returned $45,000, but if you remember, we did an additional appropriation to dispatch for that overtime line. So of that $50,000 we added to dispatch. Let me see if I can get this working again, guys. Just don't want to cooperate today. So I will email this, I was going to share it, but I'll email it after, or once I'm logged off here. Police, $150,000. Dispatch, $50,000. General government miscellaneous benefits, we returned, I believe it was $80,000. And if you remember, we did have a spending freeze, right? I'm sorry, the retirement and benefits line returned $172,000 in total. The FICA line, we returned $80,000. We returned $10,000 for the workers' compensation. We returned $25,000 for the health and safety, health and dental line. Pretty impressed with that. I mean, that's a $2.5 million line there. We got that within like 1/100% Same with retirement liability. That came in with $26,000 left, as well as the pension and retirement. A lot of those was due to when there were people out for the majority of the year. We did not hire, we did not backfill. When the deputy public works director retired, we promoted the town engineer and did not backfill that position, so that was a big savings. We've had quite a bit of turnover in public works with the the highway crew. We asked him, hey, I know you need these guys, but could you give us a month or two before you hire in between there? So when a few of those guys left and we don't hire for a month or two, if there's 6 guys and we don't hire for 2 months, there's a full-time equivalent we saved in the budget. So that's really where a lot of that savings was derived from, the spending freeze and the hiring freeze, really. And then the last but not least, and as discussed, the Board of Ed is $233,000 under budget. But they are going to be rolling that into a non-lapsing fund, it sounds like. So I will email this over to everybody. There's nothing that we really didn't talk about. The only account that came over, the only department that came over budget appears was, and it's not to the fault of the department head. I think it's just how the stipend, the emergency management department came about $2,000 over budget. But there were stipends involved there. There were payments to the past chief and things like that. So that wasn't really something that could have been controlled in that line.
So I think you kind of buried the lead there. So
Emergency management. I just wanted to say that before I said emergency management was over budget. It was more of a salary issue.
I mean the total.
So my report shows, was it 900,000? My report was 900,000, 233 Board of Ed, so about $500,000, give or take. There were a few bills that came in today, so right around the $500,000 as far as the expenditure side of the budget goes. Okay, so
No, just a little, moving forward, the horse is out of the barn now, but, looked on the agenda, we're gonna get a report on this, and then we don't get anything. And I like to get it beforehand. I thought it was going to be on the counter when I came in here, but for a while now, it seemed to be chased our tail on getting financial information. And, I asked for things and I don't get them. I remember once I asked for a balance sheet. It took months to get it. But I'd like to get these things before the meeting instead of after the meeting. I'd like to see it. That's how I work.
absolutely, yeah. We're a bit of a time crunch. We have the auditors coming next week for the 24 audit, so we were prioritizing that kind of over this a little bit. So,
Question, please.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know, the numbers sound like good news to me. Can you just contextualize them for this year compared to previous years? How do we stand, and what made them similar or different? I don't want exact necessarily, just roughly.
This was a challenging year. This is the first year we've had a consolidated fire service and a consolidated fire chief. So that department with some the union contract negotiations really put pressure on the town side budget as far as increased overtime, having minimum staffing, whereas before we had 7 firefighters on during the day, 3 on at night, 1 per house, which was really not a conducive system. So going to that the 24 on, 48 off for 4 firefighters, and having 4 on, 2 in Niantic, 2 in Flanders, definitely put pressure on this budget. I mean, that was a big reason why we had that spending freeze. That line was double of what we were anticipating. So that was,
Are you saying that the numbers that we're getting back this year are maybe a little bit less than previous years because of these changes?
I think last year there was kind of a couple black swan events that happened, right? 2 police chiefs, things like that. This year our budget is a little more hardened, so we anticipated increased overtime line for the fire department. That's closer to $600,000, which is closer to the actual of where it was. Only paying for 1 head of the police department, so that's saving $150,000 over the course of the year. I think there's a few things that have been going our way. Some of the investigations on the police side for legal lines are all, so far they're all closed up. That was a $100,000 unanticipated expense. The audits, rolling multiple audits in a year, that's an unanticipated expense. So some of these are wrapping up. So our budget, there's always unanticipated things that come up. 1 boat rolls on shore, that's $30,000, and that did happen last year actually. So that was part of it. So there was a few black swan events last year that kind of, last year was the first year in a while I've seen additional appropriation for the town. We added $900,000. We added 1% to the budget mid-year. So I don't foresee that this year because we've taken better steps in budgeting. But
Thanks for the background.
Well, the audits are budgeted every year. Wouldn't they be just kept as a liability for each year?
service is not performed yet, so you can't encumber. I've talked to the auditors. You can't encumber for services you haven't done yet.
So what, is that a Gatsby thing?
I just think it's recognition, right? You haven't incurred the service, so you can't expense it.
The gap, I just look at it, it goes against the year that it's supposed to go against. So
But you didn't do the
fiscal year,
service.
But I'm more gap. I know Gatsby's a little odd.
Different animal.
If I could just add, we had our meeting today with the state of Connecticut on the audits. It sort of fits in this section, and it went very well. I think they are encouraged by, we have an aggressive timeline, but for completing 2024, but one that, at least from the auditor's perspective and the others, that appears to be doable. And they're recognizing that we have made real progress in getting to current budget, single audit submissions to the state of Connecticut. So I think that is, it's been a lot of time, but a lot of the hard work was done on the 2023 budget, particularly with assets, identifying the value and the depreciation of the various assets. Because that's been done now, 2024 should go much easier. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And the auditor agreed.
Auditor agrees.
So the auditor had to confirm what we were saying at the MFAC meeting this morning,
Yep.
and she agreed to our aggressive timeline. I believe I shared that last week with the board for the 12/31 date for our 2024 audit, and that'll get us closer to being on track for the 26 audit. The 25 audit will hopefully be done before June 30, 2026, which will then put the following audit on time for the first time in more than 14 years. So that would be great. Okay, so if anyone doesn't have any questions with that, I have a few more items. What do you got, Rich?
Yes, Kevin, just back to Scott's question, the approximately 500,000 reduction in what our expenditures were.
Mhm.
How does that compare to past years? Just rough ballpark. Is it about the same, less, more?
Every year's a little different, right? Especially since COVID.
Right.
It's been really, so there was one, I think there might even be a graph in here. Let's see here, not a graph, but when we look at the fund balance, if you want to flip forward a little bit, the fund balance projection. I mean, so essentially, the fund balance projection with the Board of Ed work paper, if you back out the Board of Ed, how much they've returned to fund balance over the last few years, the difference is what the towns returned, right? So when we look at 2020 to 2021, in 2020 we had a $10 million fund balance. End of 21 we had a $12 million fund balance. That was $1.9 million that was returned to the fund balance. Well, that wasn't all the expense side. We had a tax sale that year, right? So the tax sale, I believe, was $1.4 million. So, it could have been $500,000 under budget there as well. But that really, that paints the picture. That fund balance right there, that's showing what you're adding every year, right? So in 2022, we added almost $3 million from the 21 to 22. 22 to 23, we're adding $700,000, and 23 to 24, we're anticipating more than $1 million, about 1.3, 1.4 million. So we are starting to get tighter on these ranges. And just thinking, since I've been here, my 3-year anniversary was last week. The first year I was here, we didn't have a budget for motor vehicle supplemental. That's now $550,000 that is no longer unbudgeted. We are now budgeting for that revenue. Right, so the revenues are getting tighter, right? So now we're tightening up that collection rate. Went from 98, I believe we're at 99 now. So that's less extra revenue we're anticipating, right? Because we're tightening up that budget. So as the budgets, we're finding these little pockets that we weren't really budgeting for. As those start to get tighter, there's not really that excess revenue coming in because we're anticipating it, we're calculating it. Unless it's truly, something unanticipated, it's being budgeted for.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so opioid settlement grant. After the Board of Ed Munis report here, this double-sided report, there's a report. It says Town of East Lyme, and it's got the nationalopioidsettlement.com across the top. What this report shows is the town's the settlement. So essentially, over the next through 2039, the town will receive $530,000 in accumulated in revenues from these various drug agencies or drug companies or whatever they are. So far, we have collected $173,213.67. To date, we have spent $2,576.81. We have a rolling fund balance right now to date, $170,636.86. Okay, so while we're talking about this, I guess we could just mention real quickly, we'll talk about the local cannabis and how much money there is there as well. So, next page, I stapled these so it should be nice and easy for you guys. The next page is the proposed budget, or the approved budget now, from the Board of Selectmen of the local cannabis tax to spend approximately $25,000 on these outlined objectives. If you flip this over one page, the back side of that, this will show you the revenues and the projected revenues through the year end. So far, we've collected $17,208. I am projecting, through year end, we'll collect about approximately $64,000. What I did, I took the March, April, May, and June. I took out the outlier of February because I don't believe it was a full month. It wasn't really, known to the public. It was only $50,000 in revenues. I took the $85,000, the $117,000, the $185,000, and the $135,000. Those are monthly recreational cannabis revenues in the town of East Lyme. I took those, added them up, and then just kind of did a blended rate. We're averaging about $130,000 in monthly recreational cannabis revenues. That equates to about $3,900 of local municipal cannabis tax. If we project this through the rest of the year, that, like I said, the fund balance about $64,000. The Board of Selectmen last week allocated $25,000, leaving approximately $40,000 here at year end. Not right now, but at year end. Does that make sense? So, with that being said, you have 170,000 opiates. You have 40,000 approximately here at year end. Now I open it up to the floor for questions.
So, when we saw these numbers, and the the grants that were made by the Board of Selectmen, I just brought up the fact that during the budget hearing with Youth and Family Services, we talked about the cannabis money, and we pretty clearly said when Sarah Furman was requesting that the part-time position go to a full-time and that the cannabis funds could be used to offset that salary, and that would be an appropriate use of this. So I did email the Board of Selectmen and ask them to consider, you know, in the future, if we could allocate some of these funds to offset the Youth and Family Services salaries as we had discussed during the budget hearings.
I think that was, no, I think that was contemplated, and I think we're enjoying a little more revenue than we had anticipated from the cannabis, and so we thought it would be worthwhile to engage the public a little bit more, and finding other legitimate uses for that money other than just supplementing the salaries of in the Youth and Family Services. A lot of these proposed expenditures really have to do with volunteerism and community engagement, and there have been many. I've read several articles in the past month or two, but there's such a decrease in volunteerism in every aspect of modern life, whether it's church groups or civic groups like Lions, Rotary. It's hard to get people to get involved, and it's not something that's on everybody's radar anymore that they should. So we think it would be it would benefit the town to try to engage some of these different groups in outreach efforts. So it seems like a worthwhile and beneficial use for relatively small sum of money in the whole scheme of things, but I think the benefit certainly exceeds the cost.
And granted, this is a policy decision, not a budget decision. I
Right.
guess I just, having more and more people on all of these cannabis, leads to more youth problems and using it for waypoint signage for EV charger stations, to me, just didn't connect with opioid grant money. But like I said, that's a
Oh, that's
policy
interesting. I
decision.
don't know quite how that fits. I know about the, what?
Cannabis.
The
That was
can-
cannabis money.
This is
Yeah,
cannabis
cannabis,
money,
yeah.
yeah.
Just wanted to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cannabis.
But same thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure how closely that fits, but it's a small sum. But with why that is a little bit important is, we do have the chargers now that in town, and we would like to see that they get used. And there are apps. There are, if you have a Tesla or one of the cars that utilizes the chargers, there are apps and software that tells you where the chargers are located. And so the more visible those chargers are, the more likely people will use them. So it's important to have some signage to direct them to where they are, and that benefits the town. We want to see, positive revenue from the use of those chargers. Even though it's minimal, we want it to be on the plus side.
Question, please. So I'm just trying to understand, I saw the email you sent about the discussion we had about youth and family services. Do we make a commitment, or is there anything binding about what we said that?
I think it was, wow, that would be great. Can we make sure that this is used for that? And there,
So I heard you say contemplating. Is
Yeah.
that
you know
Can you
what,
just-
it's not a verbatim, exactly what was said during the whole meeting. So, but, I felt like when we agreed to that in the budget, it was because we were feeling like this money was going to be coming in to offset. So, I'd say, could there have been something that we had done better to make sure that that's how it was used, and I don't know the answer to that because, but I would just hope that our intent would weigh with the Board of Selectmen, that we wanted to have some of this be offsetting that.
And I think that's understood. And I will say that Youth, Family, and Human Services has been, I want to say very successful. I mean, they're really, there was the need. We are augmenting resources. I think it was a good move to create that organization, and I think they're doing well with it, and hopefully we can continue to fund them reasonably so it stays in place.
Thank you.
Of
So,
course.
Kevin, to Denise's and Scott's point, the greater tax collection, is that enhancing our ability to provide for the Youth and Family Services Department? Where we were thinking from the Board of Finance that the cannabis grant would kind of be put towards that.
I still think there's a lot of resources there. I mean, you know, by year end, we'll have 40,000 accumulated roughly. It's probably going to be more than that in the cannabis, and we still have 170,000 set aside right now for opiates. Not opiates, opioid settlement,
Okay.
opioid settlement funds, right?
Oh, okay.
So I believe right now the social worker is out for 6 months. Is that an extended leave? I can't think it was a social worker, the other position.
One of the two. Yeah.
So there is a discussion about when that person does come back, will the position be filled in a full-time capacity? Because I believe they were both part-time in the budget, but there was a discussion on making one of them full-time
Full-time.
with this funding. So I think that is a conversation we just had last week with Youth and Family Services. So stay tuned. I think there might be something coming
And
down the pike for that.
with that extended medical leave or personal leave, whichever it is,
I mean, they would get
are
full
they-
benefits.
are the services stretched at this point because we added the personnel because we were
I-
anticipating the need and the requirement for the personnel?
I think there was an anticipation this person was going to be gone
Yeah.
for, I think it's like a semester. I think they're still in school. So I think that was anticipated. I believe we have a backup person filling in, so I don't think that's an issue. The one thing will be, I believe the budget for both positions, social worker and case manager or wellness prevention coordinator, I think it is, were both 28-hour-a-week positions. The idea was, the initial ask was for them both to be 37.5-hour-a-week employees. So when those positions come back, when that person comes back, I think there'll be a discussion, you know, with the first selectman and the director of that department, look at the resources available, the cannabis funds and the opiate funds, and
See what we
say,
can do.
you know, is this the appropriate use of that money?
Right. Just one last question, and I don't know how much discussion you have with Nightjar, but you know, there's a 50,000 drop off in gross revenues in June. That kind of surprises me because our population swells with tourists then. Do we have any idea what's going on with the sales? Is the
So we
honeymoon
don't-
over?
So I talked to the accounting department at Nightjar, and so they send the report to the state, but there's, you know, I never ask what goes on behind the scenes there. I imagine they're getting audited by the state of Connecticut, so we just, you know, I'm relying on the state to do their job on that audit. I thought that was interesting too, being a seasonal municipality, you know, we kind of surge in the springtime, or the, you know, the summertime, but, you know, who knows if they were running a sale or something in May, you know, and it's kind of, you know, it's a new store, so who knows the fluctuality of
Right,
their revenues,
right.
you know?
And I had discussions too. I mean, I spoke with the proprietor, and it is surprising. She was surprised too, as I think the rest of us are looking at those numbers. And what does it say about people's habits and what they like? I would have thought in the summer
Yeah.
cannabis would have gone up. I don't know, but anyhow,
Memorial Day weekend, a lot of fun.
yeah. So.
Maybe May was the outlier month being so high.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, it could be. But yeah, it is an interesting number, and not sure what the answer is. I would, while we're on the topic though of the Youth and Family Services, if I may, I did have a meeting, Sarah Furman and I, who's the director, we met with the first selectman of Salem. And we are trying to see if there is some engagement that we can do with Salem. They have some, again, they have some cannabis, opioid money, yeah, that they have. And they're trying to find, a place to park it, a way to use it. So this may solve their problem. This may be a legitimate use of that funding for them. And perhaps we could offer some services either in Salem or they could come down here. But that would expand our resource and bring in a little more revenue. So we're exploring that. We've had those discussions, and I've met twice now with the first selectman in Salem.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right, last topic, fund balance. I think it bleeds into the new business a little bit. So, fund balance projection is the same as last time. Excuse me. Last time you received it. But one thing to note, see it in print. Let's see if I can pull it up here. So I wanted to see how much. Sorry, I can't do two things at once. How much the Board of Ed, so now that we know the Board of Ed's established a non-lapsing fund, how much has the Board of Ed kind of returned, what's the impact to the town's fund balance, right? So I went through 12 years of the audits and went through the RSIs, the supplemental information in the back that breaks down the budget versus actuals, and went through each of them and calculated how much the Board of Ed returned to fund balance. There was 2 years, the 575 from the COVID year, and then in 2018, the $595,000. And then the little calculation over here, in 2019, they returned $1, but they also had an additional appropriation that year of $394,000. So I just wanted that to kind of be noted there, that while they returned $1, it was actually really, negative almost $400,000 because they, whatever. So an average of about $128,000 a year returning to the town. So just going forward, this one, if we just take this and kind of copy and paste it for the next 12 years, that 1.5 million will be diverted outside of the general fund's fund balance. So long as the Board of Ed votes to move it and divert it to their non-lapsing fund. So the Board of Ed, so if we just want to bleed into the next topic.
Yeah, so maybe just to kind of get everybody to the same page, a couple of years ago, when this non-lapsing fund was created by the state, it basically gave the Board of Ed the ability to retain a surplus up to a certain percentage of their
2%?
of their overall budget. But in order to create that, they had to get the approval of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. We had, I think at that time it was Kevin Seary.
July 23.
Yeah, and had discussions with the Board of Ed chair and the superintendent, and we walked through the reasons why we thought that it was a bad idea. First and foremost, we're all one town, and if the Board of Ed got to a situation where they needed an additional appropriation for some, reason that they couldn't manage, then certainly the town would be there for them. And by diverting these funds to this non-lapsing fund at the Board of Ed, it meant that it could impact what our total fund balance is. We don't have the ability to claw it back from the Board of Ed if we had something catastrophic going. And so, we basically said, you don't really need, we'll be there for you. It doesn't seem like it makes sense to have two different funds. I'm not sure, and I haven't had a chance to go through the whole legislation, but, are they going to start investing it on their own? Or, the other loss to the town is when the funds are not in the general fund, we're not earning interest on them. So, so to be perfectly frank, I was very upset to learn that they had adopted this without any discussions with the Board of Finance. Dan, I don't know whether they discussed it
No.
with you.
This was news to me.
Yeah, so here's something that is very impactful on the town's finances. And it certainly would have been nice to know when we were adopting the budget. You know, we had the indication that they could have borne reducing their increase by $1.5 million. And, you know, I don't know if it would have changed some of your minds about, you know, cutting that back to only the reduction of 675. But now you know, going forward, they're going to be incented to try to get a larger budget so they can retain more and roll it over year after year. So, you know, and in discussions that I had with the chair and the superintendent, they're like, well, conversely, you know, the Board of Finance could then just go in each year and say, oh, well, we're just going to reduce your budget request by the amount of what's in our non-lapsing surplus fund. So, you know, I just feel like this is something that you end up playing a lot of games with between the two bodies. But, well, John and Paul and I will not be here next year to deal with that. So we'll leave it to you guys, potentially, to figure out how you want to deal with it.
Question, so, you know, I've said, I think what you just explained sounds alarming to me, that they wouldn't have been transparent about this. What recourse do we have?
So we did, Kevin did reach out to our attorneys. You know, sometimes it's hard to read the state statutes, and we just wanted to be perfectly clear. Did we have the right to, you know, say, no, we don't want to do this? And they came back and said, no, the state legislature did change it so that the Board of Ed didn't need permission from the selectmen or the Board of Finance to do it. They do put some other constraints around reporting, and what they can do with the money, and so that ends up being one of the questions. It's got to be used for educational something, but
Did you read the last bullet point?
yeah, the question.
Other unanticipated costs or purchases of goods or services.
Yeah.
So that's a catch-all.
Yeah,
So it can only go up to, so it's 2% annually, and I believe the fund can only go up to 4%. So essentially 2 years, but this current year, if it was a full 2%, that would have been $1.2 million. So they're, you know, it's 233,000 right now, but it could have been up to 1.2 million and up to 2.4 million in that fund. It can be, I guess.
It sounds like this is going to be applicable in the next budgeting year also, and we should try to get ahead of it in terms of understanding what their intent is and get some increased transparency. Might there be some value in asking the superintendent and their finance officer to come before us and talk about it? I'm asking.
Again, to be perfectly honest, so I spoke with the Board of Ed. I didn't speak with him. I texted him. He was out of the country, and he said I can have the superintendent call you. But I thought it was. I haven't spoken to him. To your point, I thought it was a discussion that should be had with the entire Board of Finance.
Building upon that, Denise, as a part of our meetings, we always used to have the superintendent give his report. That vanished over the last couple of years and was supplanted with the quarterly reports from the finance director of the schools.
And
with
to that
introduction,
point, I didn't have such a problem with not, that they always didn't really know what we wanted to hear. You know, and as a Board of Finance, the only thing that made sense for us to have oversight over is the financials. So,
Right.
you know, hearing about the different, you know, games that were won and things like that, I didn't, so I didn't have an issue with not having them come up and show up. We all go to
But
plenty
in
of
terms of, I don't want to use the term slush fund, but it almost sounds like a slush fund. In terms of creating this fund, that we don't know that they'll be investing as the town does with money that's not in the general fund. And in light of the fact that it could vary substantially year to year depending how much their school budget is increased each year, there could be a potential for padding to be able to put more into a fund if they had a special project that they wanted to do that kind of fell out of the scope of our capital project plans or other items like that. I think it would be beneficial to have the superintendent come in and report again from the financial end of things, not about the football team did this and the soccer team did this, and you know, we can read that in the day, that's there every day, the coverage of the sports. And I think we really need to have some cooperation in terms of fiscal issues. And lately it seems like the cooperation hasn't really been there.
This has been talked about for many years now, and nothing ever really happens. And I have the problem with this fund, is probably many of you have, that 2% of their present approved budget is over $1 million. So every year, if that rolls over, before you know it, it's going to be millions of dollars in that fund that they can use any way they want, because the language of the three items that they can use it for is very general. So my question is, where do we stand now, and what recourse do we have to kind of slow this down or stop it?
I don't think we have any.
It's been approved by the legislature?
Yeah, it's, the
This is
law
approved
was passed.
September 2024.
We have asked for an opinion of council to interpret the Public Act. And just to differentiate, you know, Public Act is an amalgam of very different rules and laws, and it's hard to interpret sometimes until it's codified into an actual statute. So I think it'll be easier to understand the range and the intent once it's codified. So right now, we're looking at the language of the Public Act and trying to interpret that. So,
And, you know, I think the other, I guess, ironic aspect of it is if our general fund balance suffers because of it, then that could impact our ratings.
Sure.
And, you know, what percentage of our bonded projects are Board of Ed? Like 60%?
A big percent.
Yeah, I was just
it has wide-ranging implications. And if I may, and I think the most significant part of it, aside from the numbers, is just, you know, this feeling of lack of transparency, that perhaps we were played, and I don't think anybody likes that. And I think if we're going to make progress in the future, we have to try to be real with one another, both the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, Board of Ed. And yeah, and they may have gained some advantage this past year in doing this. But I think, you know, it really defeats the larger picture and the synergy of working together. So I think that's the bigger
Well,
problem.
when this want to reinforce that, that's how I feel about it, the same way. It's like, I'm sure they're all patting themselves on the back that they, you know, they
Well,
pulled
when-
one over on us, and
And
I
I
don't
had
think
been
it's-
having regular conversations during the budget process with the superintendent and the chair, so I don't want to say it was lack of communication.
So I'm wondering whether or not it's appropriate to have a motion that we ask the superintendent to come in and discuss what happened last year and how they intend to handle the situation next year. It's just the discussion here has made me feel a little bit cynical about the future interactions that we might have with them, given this history. So, do we need a motion?
Would you like to make that
do
motion?
I'm
I
ask-
mean,
do we
we're
need a
happy to-
motion? I'll make the motion if we need to make it, and if we can't just
Sure,
ask.
go ahead.
So I guess I move that we ask the superintendent and their budget officer to come in for the Board of Finance to discuss this fund and how it was allocated last year, and the lack of transparency to us about it, and what they intend to do in the coming year.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I just think we need to include the board chair in that
Yes.
as well.
Including the board chair.
Okay, so I amend my motion to include the board chair then also.
Motion has been made and
I'll second that.
seconded. Yep. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. So Kevin, do you want to extend that invitation? Any further discussion on the Board of Ed non-lapsing fund?
I guess all I was going to say, I think that, no, from my perspective, it's important that we hear the truth of what went on last year and what they're thinking for the coming year. But I just think that the increased transparency will make for a better working relationship with them. So I'm not thinking of this as being a punitive discussion. I'm thinking of this as being an educational in both directions.
Any other comments? Okay, public discussion. We have no public. Board comments? Anyone have anything for the good? No? Do I have a motion to
To adjourn.
second? Second? All those in favor?
All right.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.